what we're gonna do, I'm gonna go through every single setting in the Facebook Business Manager, and I'm gonna tell you what it is and what to do with it. As someone recently in the mentorship group asked me this exact question, because while he's following our playbook, he does understand what all the settings are and what you should do with them. I'm gonna demystify that. I'm gonna go through every single one, explain the use cases of how you use them, when you should use them, or if you should even use them, and for what type of businesses should use them. I remember when I first got started, I would just do the person who I paid as a coach, I would just do what they told me to do. But it does help to know what the different settings are, if you should use them and when you should use them, just so that you have that knowledge for yourself. So when you face that situation, you know what might be an applicable strategy. So I have a complete blank dummy ad account, and I'm going to walk through, as if I'm creating a campaign, exactly what every setting is, what it does, and hopefully you guys can have some understanding for yourself and that knowledge. So the first thing is when you go to create a campaign, it gives you different campaign objectives. Now above that, you have what's called an auction or reservation. So just some context of what this is. Meta is an auction, meaning you are constantly technically bidding for attention. Even though if you choose automatic bidding, it is still bidding for attention. Now reservation, what that does is it allows you to pre-reserve CPMs ahead of time. So this is quite famous for people that have massive budgets. And essentially what you're doing is you can tell Meta, hey, I'm willing to spend $10 a CPM. I want to go ahead and reserve that CPM and lock it in, and they will do their best to keep that CPM. Now, I'm going to be really transparent, and I say, in my opinion, this does not work unless you, number one, you have really massive budgets. Number two, it does not work because most brands are very return on investment conscious, meaning they need to be able to see a return for the dollars they spent. And most brands I see using this, they have massive budgets, or they don't care so much on return on investment. They just care about eyeballs or awareness. So for 99.99999% of brands, don't even use this, just go straight to auction. Now, when you have these different campaign objectives, typically, depending on your business, it will determine what you use. What do I mean by that? Well, for e-commerce businesses, you're going to want to always choose a sales objective. Now, this is a very important concept, and if you understand this concept, it'll be quite clear. In that Meta, you tell it what you want. And so, for example, if I want sales, which I hope you want sales, if you're watching this video, I'm sure you want sales. If I want sales, which is direct to consumer sales, they see a product, they click it, they check out. I want to click sales because Meta uses machine learning and AI to go and find people they think are most statistically likely to complete that action with the product you're selling. And so its entire machine learning is focusing on doing that thing for you. So that's why you always go with sales. Versus if you went with like traffic or awareness, you're essentially telling Meta, hey, I don't give a crap about sales. I just want you to have people click and go to my website. What it's going to do is going to optimize for people who are the most likely at scale and cheapest to complete that action. And that's why if you ever do traffic campaigns, it's complete junk traffic too, because it doesn't care. Meta is going to only serve it to people that it knows just click websites or maybe even bots potentially, and it doesn't care about sales. And so 99% of the time, always go with sales when it comes to e-commerce. Now, there are really rare cases when you might want to use awareness. Let me explain some of those. So awareness campaigns are typically, that I've seen lately, are for brands where they're already spending a lot of money, like $900,000, $1 million a month. And for whatever reason, they're having issues getting more incremental new customers. And I've seen brands recently where they will launch a awareness campaign to try to fill more of their top of funnel sales objective. That's a very advanced tactic. So because the hard part about this is it's not always clear the incrementality of awareness campaign versus sales, but I'm just here to explain to you the use cases of when you use this. Now, for most brands, if you're spending like under $100,000 a month, in my opinion, over $1 million, under $1 million a month, I would never go to awareness campaign because again, you're essentially telling Meta, I don't care about a return on investment. I just care about people knowing who I am. Now, unless you have deep pockets, we need to have some kind of justifiable return on investment. And so that's why for 99.99% of the time, you wouldn't do this. Now, we have a few brands quite recently where, because they're spending so much money, we would launch a companion awareness campaign just to force Meta to get it to net new eyeballs. Now, what's important to understand is Meta, because it knows its ecosystem, well, if you give it, like, for example, a sales campaign, it knows of everyone on the platform, who are the people most statistically likely to complete that action. And we use the term pockets. It serves it to the right pockets of people. Now, a pocket can be also big. It can be millions and millions of people. But when we've been running ads at high budget for a long period of time, and on rare occasions, we find that we're just struggling to break through new people, we may run an awareness campaign, but it's so rare that anyone watching this, don't even look at it. I'm just giving you the reasons and situations of how to do it. Traffic campaign essentially tells Meta, only only go after people who are likely to click. Very simple. You can read it for yourself. I never recommend a brand run traffic campaigns ever, unless you are trying to just get traffic. So for example, I have a buddy who runs SEO sites. He's an SEO machine, SEO master, and he will run traffic campaigns because he's trying to do what's called traffic arbitrage, where if he has AdSense or some kind of affiliate on the back end on his page, he wants to get traffic. And so he'll run traffic campaigns because he knows he'll make about 4 cents per traffic visitor to his website because he has AdSense. And so he'll run traffic campaigns and bid on traffic to where he's happy to pay 2 cents per click to get some of the page because he'll make 4 cents, right? And have that margin. So, but that's like extremely rare case. That's the only situation, in my opinion. Nowadays, I think anyone should ever be running traffic campaigns unless you're doing massive budgets. Because if you're doing huge budgets like 1 to 2 million in spend per month, you may want to do other traffic objectives because Meta has no more other pockets of people to go after that are net new. And so I do see really big budgets where they may launch awareness or traffic campaigns just to get new pockets of people. But still, that's like an extremely rare, extremely advanced tactic on how to make those decisions. So for anyone watching this video, unless you are spending $2 million a month on ads, I wouldn't even consider these. Now, engagement, most brands don't need to do this because essentially you're saying, hey, Meta, I just want you to get people to watch my videos, to like, to comment. Now, engagement's interesting. We see engagement being used a lot for like messenger DM campaigns. That's where it's used heavily, where you want people to comment on the post. So we have brands where they will do chatbots. What's like, comment this word to get this guide, for example. We see that quite often. And it's because you're telling Meta yet again, give me people who are more than likely to comment, right? And you can still filter it based off the targeting to hit the right pockets of people. But we do see that being used quite a bit, and it is quite successful. Now, it's a different strategy compared to going for direct sales, but it does work quite well. Or I've seen it work quite well where we had one of our previous ad strategies is we would take an ad and we would have a picture of the product, and overlaid over that picture, we would have what would you say to someone considering buying this? And we run it to past customers as an engagement campaign just to get a bunch of their past customers to comment and to talk about their experience buying the product. And they would take that same ad and we would then run it top of funnel. So that worked out quite well. Leads. Okay, leads, you only do this if you are a service-based business or if you just want email addresses or phone numbers. Now, the one thing to understand about leads campaigns is the quality can be quite poor because how it works is a lead ad, you are essentially telling Meta, I want leads. But what happens is why it is popular is because it will dynamically populate the lead form in that lead ad with the email address or phone number that the person uses on their account. And so it's a really one click, they fill nothing out, it pre-populates, they click apply. But a lot of people, the email addresses that they use on their accounts, like for Meta accounts or Instagram, are junk emails where like all their junk emails go. And so that's why the quality can be quite poor. Typically, if I'm doing lead ads, I like to do phone numbers because I don't know about you, but I don't have like separate phone numbers. I just have one phone number. App promotion is very clear. It is what it is. It's for people that have an app, and that's it. So that essentially is the business objectives and what you use it for. So let's say for this example, it's going to choose sales because most of the people watching this on this channel are running e-commerce. All right, now what do you do here? So Advantage Plus, hopefully you guys know what that is. I'm not going to go into detail explaining everything of Advantage Plus is. Essentially, it's very few settings, letting Meta just take over all control and let it just put your ad in front of the people it thinks is most likely to convert. I like most of the time we choose manual just because we have different rules of how we run campaigns, but Advantage Plus works great too. So not much I have to explain here on the differences. So let's go ahead and choose manual sales because it has more settings for us to go through. All right, so now we come here, pretty standard stuff. Now let's go to some of the first settings. Now, the first setting is only applicable if you are in areas where Meta flags or restricts you or has strict rules. So unless you're not in these categories, you don't have to fill this out. But for example, what was it back in 2018, you have to pre-authorize yourself to run political ads and get okay. But same thing with this, like employment, they have some restrictions here, but if you guys are watching this, you don't have to worry about that. Now, let's talk about the next one. So on the campaign details, pretty standard stuff when it comes to this. This is if you're going to run like dynamic product ads. We still run dynamic product ads. We just run them instead of like CBO campaigns. But if you're doing Advantage Plus, for example, you check that on and it'll allow you to run catalog ads inside of your Advantage Plus campaign. I'm a huge fan of product ads. For example, in our group call with the mentorship this past week, we were just looking at ad accounts and they asked me like, what's some of the best performing ads? And so I pulled up our ads and literally some in the top 10 best ads were catalog campaigns. And they still crush, especially if you're photography is quite visual, they still crush, man. So yeah, that's a little side note. Now, this is if you want like a campaign spending limit. So for example, if I wanted to say that I only want to spend $10,000 or $15,000, you can set a campaign level spending limit, and that's essentially what that setting's for. And just real quick on the campaign spending limit, we never choose this because we don't want our ads to stop after they spend a certain amount of money. Now, you could do that if like you're really strict on budget, but honestly, like 99% of the time, like we just don't even do this. So this is the interesting one where, you know, we have done this before, where if you want to control the amount of spend that's going behind certain ad sets, this is how you do that. Now, typically you do that when if you want to just have more control and you want to force Meta to spend more evenly across ad sets, like if you're like in a CVO campaign or like a VH Plus. We don't do that so much anymore. We just give Meta room to let it choose. We see that it seems to work the best because Meta knows something that we don't, and so we don't really do that much. Now, this setting is quite interesting where if you want to give Meta control, where if it thinks it can get a higher quality number of people to complete your action, like sales, for example, you can check this and you can give it certain conditions on when you want it to increase the budget. For example, if you know like weekends, for example, perform better, you can do that. Or if you know that between 9 p.m. and midnight perform better, you can give it certain criteria to increase the budget, increase the spending during those times. We rarely use this. Not saying we shouldn't use this, to be honest with you, because some brands, especially like women's fashion, we see a very big trend that like later in the day and on the weekends perform very well. So it's actually a smart thing to do. I just never tried, to be honest with you. We typically just run ads all the time. Now, this is one where I do like this one. It's if you just want to run A and B tests and you want Meta to just be cleaner in the ad account, Meta can, for example, take campaigns, split in half. Or if you want to test two different audiences, it'll split it in half and it'll work to more evenly distribute the spend between those tests, like a more true split test. You can definitely do it. I don't see any reasons not to do it. We typically just, have separate ad sets, separate campaigns, and just have separate ads and let Meta just do its thing. But this is a pretty cool tool, especially if you want to split test creative audiences, placements. Yeah, it is pretty cool. So, okay, so now diving into the ad set level. Okay, so same thing before. You just need to think through when it comes to conversion location, think through what makes sense for my brand. Now for most brands, they have a Facebook and Instagram shop where you import your products so people can check out on Facebook or Instagram. Meta's pushing this really hard because they get a percentage of that revenue from the shop. And so just like everything else, if Meta's getting a cut of it and they're prioritizing it, means it's probably a good idea for you to do it. But if you don't have a shop set up, just go website. But just make sure you test that. We'll often test website versus website shop. So I'd say for the majority of our brands, if they don't have shop set up, we're obviously just going to website. But if we have website and shop, then we'll have that selected. And kind of same thing too, where if you have like an e-commerce site and an app associated with it, you can do that. Same with messaging apps. Like if you want people to go to like WhatsApp or DMs, or you want to drive conversions via calls. But majority of times for all e-commerce brands, we're just going to website. Now for you guys, you always are pretty much going to do just maximize number of conversions. Now, if you are doing bidding caps or cost caps, you can do that. But for us, most of the time we just go highest volume, which we've talked about that many times. But this is where you go and select that setting. Now, this is where you select the pixel. So pretty simple stuff. Like when you have on your website, you have a pixel. This is where you add what pixel. Now, some brands have several pixels for different reasons, but this is where you just select pixel. Now we just said that we wanted, and in this campaign, this is in this setting, you're choosing what event do you want. Now this is important because again, you're telling Meta to optimize for what you want. And just like on the different campaign types, this is the exact same principle where you want Meta to do the thing that's actually going to drive a net positive in your business. And I don't know about you, but I want purchases because Meta, it will try to optimize for the end result you want because I'm saying purchase. But if I put like view content, which means people just came to my website and viewed it, I'm going to be optimizing getting a bunch of junk traffic because you're telling Meta, hey, I don't care about purchase. I just want you to get as many people to my product page as possible. And so we don't ever use these optimizations because they don't work. Purchase always outperforms. There may be really, really, really rare situations where you may want to have like an add to cart or initiate checkout, and those are typically in situations where you're just trying to fill your funnel with more eyeballs because Meta's going to optimize for those pockets of people. But from my experience, optimizing review content, add to cart, initiate checkout, it's just junk, man. You get junk traffic. Now, this is a setting you can change. Attribution settings is actually quite important. By default, Meta chooses 7 days click, 1 day view, or you can do engaged view as well. So why this is important is because typically if you have like spending like less than $20,000 a month and you just don't have a lot of data, we'll use the default default 7 days click, 1 day view because it's more data Facebook uses to optimize. Because the more data you have going through a campaign, the more likely you're going to leave learning phase. And the learning phase doesn't guarantee that you are going to get like amazing results. It just helps to bring more stability to the results, so you don't have crazy wild swings on CPAs. Now, what we typically do is how we make decisions in the ad account, we are reviewing how many purchases do we get. Was it from clicking or from viewing? And the moment we see that view attribution goes above 20%, we'll switch to 7-day click because we care about incrementality. What do I mean by that? Is if someone sees your ad, but they didn't click on it, and somehow Meta attributes a purchase going to them, did that ad really make a difference, or are they already going to buy anyways? Or is it something else that made them convert and buy? Versus someone sees an ad, they click it, and then they buy. You see what I'm saying? That means it's way more incremental and actually driving an action. And so that's why we pretty much, as brands scale and they spend more money, eventually removing the 1-day view, because Meta is going to optimize for the thing you tell it to optimize for. And so if I want more people to see an ad and to click on it that actually drives action, I'm going to use 7-day click. All right. Now, dynamic creative, we do use this. This is essentially where let's say you have one ad concept, but you have 10 variations, 10 different hooks and 10 different texts. Dynamic creative is a great way to put it all into one creative and let Meta rotate through the different combinations and variations. That's really the only time that you would use that. But if you don't have a bunch of variations per concept, then we don't use that. Budget and scheduling, that makes sense. Budget and scheduling, this is pretty self-explanatory. Choose when you want your campaign to start, or if you have an end date. We never send end dates on our campaigns. We just turn it off personally. And I don't know why, but I feel like anytime we've done this in the past, it doesn't just perform as well. And so we just prefer just to turn things off. Unless you have like a really, like we do use if there's like a Black Friday offer or something that's going away by midnight and we don't want to stay up to turn it off, you can set an end date. That's fine too. We've already talked about this, but this is essentially on the ad set level. I can set what is my spend limit. Why this works well is, let's say for example, you have a CBO campaign and you have 4 different ad sets and you want Meta to spend more evenly between those ad sets. You can set spend limits to tell Meta, hey, I want you to spend at least $100 on each ad set before then taking over and optimizing from there. Now, this is interesting. When it comes to scheduling your budget, we don't really use this that often. All right, so budget scheduling. We don't use that often. I explained it more on the campaign level, but this is where, if you notice, there are very clear times, days of the week or hours of the day where you know there's more intent to buy. You can set that schedule and tell Meta, I want you to spend more during these time periods. We often don't do that because Meta technically, I have experienced that it knows those things and optimizes and reserves budget once it has enough data for those time periods, but you can do that. All right, so now we're getting into audience controls. So a lot of these things that I'm going through in the settings, most brands don't need to use, but like I said, I'm just going through every setting. So setting audience controls, that's where, for example, if you have restrictions on certain geographies. So for example, we have a brand that does a meat subscription box and they can't do it in certain states. This is an example where we will set specific controls on locations not to do it in certain places, or if there's specific age restrictions, or if there's certain audiences we don't want Meta to use or to target, but that's pretty rare. So I'd say majority of cases, like that's not an issue. Besides, especially when it comes to like audience controls, you can set that here in locations because you can literally choose what states, zip codes, radiuses. And so we typically just opt in for that. And typically we just go like for the entire country. So yeah, location, age, typically we just do 18 plus, let Meta rock and roll, let it choose. You can choose to exclude certain custom audiences as well. So for example, if there are audiences you want to exclude, like purchasers. So we often, with our campaign setup, we often exclude purchasers. We don't exclude site visitors or engagers. Maybe at a lot of scale, we'll start looking at that, but we typically only exclude purchasers and let Meta choose and decide who to go after. But that is where you can exclude those. All languages, we typically do all languages. Now, this is actually quite interesting is for some brands where we see that there is a demographic that maybe they're bilingual, we'll actually run campaigns for English and Spanish and just make ads in Spanish as well. That's quite interesting. But typically this is important where, let's say you're in a country, you're targeting a country that has a lot of diversity in languages, you may wish to choose to just that language that you're advertising in. Like for Canada, great example, Canada. Canada, in the upper right portion of Canada, like the Quebec area, French is a very popular language up there. In fact, there's websites that are only in French in that region of Canada. And that's an example where if you're advertising, but on your website, it's English, you may want to choose English versus French, for example. I even think in Quebec, tech, you're required to have English and French on your websites. But that's an example where, you may want to choose to have just French or just English. All right, so placements. Placements is where you can choose where you want your campaigns to show. So for example, you can literally choose, do I want it to show on just Meta, on just Instagram? Do I want it to show on only Reels? To be honest with you, we often just go with let Meta completely choose. And so we don't really change this that much. Now, we may see that there are certain placements that just always suck and don't perform, so we may start being restrictive on where we let ads show, but the majority of the time we just let go completely broad. But this is interesting where you can actually have certain restrictions that you give Meta on, like don't show on publisher sites, because Meta, your ads can show on publisher sites, and so if there are specific publishers you don't want to show on, you can do that. You can even do it based off topics. For us, majority of the time we never had that issue, so we just let Meta do its thing, but you can do that. Same thing with in-stream videos. So for example, let's say you are like a US patriotic brand and you don't want your videos showing up on like left wing or like Planned Parenthood videos and content. Well, then you can add that, right? Or better examples, if you're like a vegan brand, you don't want it showing up on carnivore diet videos and topics, you can exclude that here. But those are pretty rare circumstances. And this last setting is if there are ads you just want to import, you can literally just import the ads here. So for example, if you're like transitioning out accounts, you can import it. You can also have a structured Google Sheet that has all your ad data in there that, for example, like your image links, it can have ad copy, and you can just upload that and import it, and it'll create all the ads for you. That's a way that you can like upload ads in bulk. Most people just do it manually, but that is an option you can use. All right, now settings on the ad side. Now, what are these? So a few things on the partnership ad. If you are like doing a partnership or collaboration with the brand, you need to make that transparent. You need to say that this is a partnership ad. So you need to go ahead and do that. You can then select the post and select the partner you're working with. That is just to be compliant. So you need to make sure you do that. Then you essentially choose what Facebook page you're going to run from, and you can choose Facebook only or just Instagram only or both. Then here, now we're working on creating ads. So most of the time we used to use manual upload where we physically create every single ad. But like I said, if you want a catalog ad, you can set that up even at the ad set level and this level, which is a dynamic catalog. And if you've run ads before, this is pretty simple stuff where you're essentially choosing on the ad format section, do I want an image or a video, a carousel or a collection? These are just different ad types. Okay. I'm not saying one works better than the other. I'm just saying, frankly, you should test all of them. They're just different ad types. Now, this is an interesting one, multi-advertiser ads. This has like a two-edged sword. What I mean by that is you're telling Meta, for example, let's say I sell an energy drink. I sell energy drinks. And I'm like, yeah, I want to choose multi-advertiser ads, meaning my ad will be shown against my competitors to give people more choice. It may help you, but it also may hurt you. So it is a double-edged sword. I can't say one way or the other that this one option has made our performance better or made it worse. You just don't know. I wish Meta gave more transparency on your ad was shown to other advertisers at this time and you won 20% more sales. Like that would actually be quite helpful, but unfortunately they don't have it. So I don't know if it actually performs better. You're kind of just taking Meta's word for it and saying, oh, yay, I'm going to potentially steal more customers from my competitors by doing that. But you just don't know. And kind of like on the ad set level, you can choose for your ad to run during specific time periods. This works quite well is if, let's say you have a campaign, it's quite consolidated and you're loading up ads for a specific offer. Well, you can choose when those ads get turned off. So again, you just don't have to remember to go in and turn those ads off. So that is quite useful. We do this a lot on the Google Ads side, especially at different time periods where you can just schedule ads and ad sets to turn on or off. That's quite helpful. Now we're going to get to the destination. So this is where you're just putting the details for the ad. What's the website URL? What's the display link? You always want to fill those out. Also, you can add what is called like browser add-ons. Browser add-ons, typically we always just choose none, but if you want them to like message you, that works. For e-commerce, we always just choose none. Now, this is where if you have a Facebook or Instagram shop, you select your shop like this, because so now what happens is when people purchase, they can either purchase from the shop or they can purchase from the website. That is something you should split test if you have both to find out which one works better for you. I wish I could say one definitively works better than the other. We have some brands where doing both website and shop works well. We have some brands where just doing website works the best. So you do want to split test that. Instant experience. This is actually an interesting ad. So it used to be called a Canvas ad. You can Google and YouTube what that looks like, but essentially you're creating like an in-app shopping experience, like a landing page on your phone. The benefits of an instant experience is it's instant loading because it's hosted on Meta. You can design you can recreate your entire product page in an instant experience ad and it's instant loading. It's just only available on mobile devices because it's the instant experience, but those do work quite well. I am a fan of instant experiences and we do see a pretty good performance from those, but it just takes effort tougher because you like have to create the landing page inside of it. And it can just be like, you can literally use Canva to make it, but there are assets you have to upload. And typically most people just send the product page because it's easier. Facebook event, we rarely use this anymore, to be honest with you. We used to use a lot for product drops and like Black Friday, but now we still don't really use it. So if you have different languages, you can actually add your own translation. The reason why is like sometimes meta and translations aren't perfect, but like if you're bilingual and you want to add a translation like in Spanish or French, like that's where you do that. And then tracking, you're essentially choosing what pixel and refreshing and reviewing what pixel is being used to make it accurate. Offline events, that's where this is interesting. Offline events, you don't have to worry about that. We used to do that a lot where we would even upload offline events, but essentially what you're asking it to do is offline events is interesting is we used to do this a lot where we would upload data to Meta. That's called an offline event. It's just to help it give more data to understand who's buying. And so essentially what you're saying is here, I want you to track offline events. So when I upload my customer list, you'll be able to go back and retroactive find out who actually completed that purchase. We rarely use that anymore because most people use like third-party tracking like AAA or Northbeam. So it's really not necessary anymore if you're using those platforms. But yeah, it is quite more advanced, but not necessary in my opinion. URL parameters, typically we use this where we just want to track what campaign ad set and creative it came from. And so there's actually a dynamic URL parameter that we use that it will automatically insert the name of the campaign ad set and the ad into UTMs that then we can track on Google Analytics. You can see on the back end of your Shopify marketing analytics as well. It is quite helpful. We just do it as a habit, to be honest with you. But if you're not actively looking at your Google Analytics, then this isn't really gonna be helpful for you. And that's it. And tags, we never use tags. So that's it. Those are all the settings when setting up a campaign that you should be using. Some people just don't know what those are, and that's okay. And so that's why we went through this process to explain what are all the settings and how you should be using them.